The Raft by S.A. Bodeen. Chapter 55. My dreams were of cats, spitting, then snakes, hissing. The spitting and hissing seemed so real. My face almost felt wet. My eye opened. My face was wet. The sky was cloudy, and there was rain. I sat up and put my open mouth to the sky, just drips, barely enough to dampen my lips. After a while, my neck cramped and I looked back down. Steam! There was steam coming from my fire. No! I lunged forward and grabbed the end of a stick from the fire. I started pushing the charred wood around. Come on! Come on! But there were no more flames, and the wood was all wet. I looked back at the sky, at the dark clouds moving off to the east. How had I missed the rain? My hair was damp. I stuck some of it in my mouth and sucked, trying to get out any moisture I could. I felt my camisole, damp as well. Frantic, I yanked it over my head and twisted it, trying to wring whatever there was into my open mouth. Not enough, not enough. I hugged myself and cried more dry tears. There had been rain, enough to put my fire out, but not enough for me to get a drink. I didn't bother to put my top back on and just fell to my side. My face smashed in the sand as I watched the last bit of steam rise from the fire. The signal fire. The fire that was supposed to save my life. Suddenly, I felt a chill. I put my top back on and looked around for my hoodie. My gaze drifted to the horizon. Then I gasped. A white ship with blue writing right in front of me. Was it really there? Was it just a mirage? A hallucination brought on by dehydration? I froze. If it was a hallucination, I would die. Die from disappointment. So I told myself it wasn't real, and I sat and waited to see if I was right. Chapter 56. My imaginary ship didn't move, just sat there, anchored out at sea. I couldn't read the blue letters, but had seen enough to know it was an NOAA ship. I knew what NOAA stood for, National Oceanic and something. I tapped my forehead. You know this. I couldn't even think straight. Funny that my imaginary ship would be an NOAA one. Coast Guard would have made more sense for a rescuer. I sat up straight. Coast Guard would have made much more sense. And wouldn't a hallucination make sense? I mean, it would be a fantasy, right? Something I would want to see, like Coast Guard. NOAA was just dumb. There, on the top of the dune, I hugged my knees and watched. A boat lowered into the water and came toward the island. It's a hallucination. Max stood at the bottom of the dune and looked up at me. It's not a hallucination. I told him, but that's all you are. The boat got closer. Say it was real, just say it. Had they seen my fire? The boat neared the beach on the furthest point of the island from me. Wouldn't a hallucination have them land closer? Be more convenient? 2 people hopped out and pulled the boat onto the beach, and more people got out. They just stood around. If it was my hallucination, wouldn't they come right for me? Maybe they were real. I stood up. My legs collapsed beneath me and I rolled down the dune, landing at the bottom by Max. I could no longer see the boat or the people, because they weren't there. I laid my head on my arms, not wanting to get around the dune, not wanting to look out at the sea, not wanting to see nothing. If that's all it was, a hallucination, why exert myself? I was done. But it's not a hallucination. Max crouched in front of me. Robbie, you have to do this. You have to get to the beach. He backed up slightly. Come on. Come with me. I shook my head. I can't. He nearly shouted at me. You can! You can! I got up on all fours and crawled a few feet, then fell forward onto my face. I can't. Get up! He backed up, beckoning to me. Up on my knees again, I followed him until I was nearly around the dune. Walking ahead a bit, he turned to me. Just a little further. You can do this. I looked up at him. Are you saving me again? No. He shook his head. This is all you. Grunting, I put my head down and crawled until I had nothing left. And then I fell onto my side. I looked up and saw the boat. It was still there. So were the people. I tried to scream. I didn't even have any words, just screeches. I tried to get to my knees but fell down. So I rolled over on my back, raised my arms in the air, and kept screaming until there was nothing left. I shut my eye. Please, let the ship be real. I wasn't sure how much later it was when I heard arguing. A woman's voice. We have to get her to the ship. I'm not sure we should move her. A man. She might die if we don't. The woman again. Another man said, What the hell is she doing out here? I opened my eyes to two faces peering down at me. One was a woman with kind green eyes and curly red hair. The other a guy in a blue ball cap and a salt and pepper beard. They both wore blue shirts with NOAA on them. I couldn't do anything but blink. Are they real? The guy said, She's awake. He smiled and touched my arm. You're gonna be okay. He helped me sit up and he and the woman held me up. Then they put a bottle of water to my lips. With both hands, I held it and gulped so fast that more of it ran down my chin than went into my mouth. There was no way that water was a hallucination because I'd never tasted any so cold and clear and delicious in my entire frickin' life. I chugged that bottle so fast that my temples ached. I scrunched my eyes and pressed my palms into my forehead. The guy in the cab said, I'm Brian. We're with the NOAA. He talked so slow. Did he think I was dumb or something? You saw my fire? He looked over at the woman and shook his head. No, we're on a research trip and wanted to check out the island, he shrugged. We almost didn't stop. They hadn't seen my fire. They just happened to show up on my island. The woman asked my name. Even after all that water, my voice sounded raspy. Robbie. Well, Robbie, let's get you to the ship, okay? I nodded. But Max... The woman's forehead wrinkled. Someone else is here? I started to say something, then got a grip. I bit my lip and shook my head. No one else. Another guy came up. His eyes were brown and kind and crinkled around the edges when he smiled. I'll carry you over to the boat. He gently put one arm around me and the other under my legs, picking me up. It felt so good to be held. I wanted to sink into his arms, to never leave them. He stepped into the water. No! Don't go in there! There's a shark! I struggled to be put down, but I was too weak. He said, It's okay. Almost there. And carried me over to the boat. I didn't really want to get in their boat, but I didn't protest as he set me down inside. His white t-shirt had dirt on it. From carrying me? He climbed in and tucked a shiny silver blanket around me. Then another guy started the boat and headed for the NOAA ship. As we moved in the waves, it felt different from being in the raft. Faster, of course, but more purposeful. Not just drifting. The wind blew in my face as I accepted another bottle of water. I turned to look back at the island. Goodbye, Starbuck. Goodbye, Max. And then I passed out. Chapter 57. Something was soft under my head, and something else smelled bad. The back of my right hand hurt and itched at the same time. I reached over and felt tape. I opened my eyes. An IV tube snaked out of my hand and up into a clear bag of fluid. I squinted but couldn't read the label. My arm looked strange, striped. Then I realized it was clean from the elbow down, dirty the rest of the way. I was lying in a narrow bed. My headache was gone for the first time in ages. Welcome back! A bald guy with black glasses rolled over on a wheeled stool. I'm Dr. Gary, he smiled. You're in pretty good shape, considering. I don't want to talk about it. The words were practically out of my mouth before I even felt them. Sorry. Dr. Gary shook his head slightly. You don't have to. My eye welled up and I wiped it with my fingers, then held them up. They glistened. I have tears again. You were very dehydrated. He nodded at the IV bag. We gave you a couple of those. He smiled. Let's get you fixed up so you can get out of those clothes and get cleaned up. As he snapped on gloves, I glanced down. No wonder I'd gotten the other guy's shirt dirty. At that point, Robbie could have been listed in the dictionary as a synonym for filth. That was what I smelled. I was grateful that the doctor didn't say a word. He didn't look like he was holding his breath, but he was. I heard him suck in, then not breathe in for a bit as he inspected my left eye. I'll give you some anti-inflammatory pills for this. It's very badly bruised. Once the swelling goes down, it should be fine. He took a look at my nose as I explained what happened. Dr. Gary stood up. There's some infection in there. Probably a good thing the diamond did get ripped out. I'll give you some antibiotics, and I'd better put a couple stitches in there. I must have made a face because he said, I'm good. There won't be a scar. He cleaned my nose with some pads and smelly stuff and then left the room for a minute. The rumble of the engines increased, and I felt us move. We were leaving. I shut my eyes when I opened them. The doctor stood there, hand poised above me, holding a syringe. This will sting, but then you won't feel the stitches. Without thinking, I said, Wait, can you tell me something worse? His brow furrowed as he stood there. Worse? Worse. Any given day of the last 10 days. 10 days? Was worse. Any given minute. No one would ever have to tell me anything worse, because I'd been through worse. I'd lived worse, and I had survived worse. So I waved him off with a hand. Never mind. The shot was nothing compared to the pain when the diamond came out, and I didn't feel a single stitch. Do you feel like you can sit up? I nodded and sat up without even feeling dizzy. I'm really hungry. He practically ran over to a small black refrigerator and opened it. He turned to me. You want vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry? My mouth watered. Yes. He grinned and pulled out a couple cans and popped the top of one. It's a meal replacement shake. Take your time. See how your stomach adjusts to food. We can go a lot longer without food than we can without water. Do you know how long it's been? I shook my head and glanced at the pink label before taking a drink. Strawberry. I'd never tasted anything so amazing in my life, and I wanted to guzzle it all. I finished the strawberry and opened the chocolate. The doctor smiled. Now that we have you on your way to recovery, we should probably find out who you are. I'm Robbie Mitchell. I live on Midway. Midway Atoll? I nodded. His forehead scrunched up. I'll be right back. He left and returned a few minutes later holding a sheet of paper. He turned it my way so I could see the photo on it. It was me, taken a few months ago on Midway. Why do you have that? They sent this everywhere when you were abducted. What? I wasn't abducted. He set a hand on my arm. Your aunt declared you missing 12 days ago when her friend couldn't find you, and a couple witnesses came forward and said they saw a guy grab you near McDonald's. 12 days? Had it been that long? He cocked his head a little and looked from me to the photo. But with those little braids, you don't look anything like this. I pushed away the images of the McDonald's and the man as I shook my head. I wasn't abducted. I was on the plane. Dr. Gary asked, What plane? The supply flight to Midway on the 21st, the G1 from Oahu Air Services. He ran a hand through his short, dark hair. Impossible, he spoke slowly, like he was trying to get me to understand. No one survived that crash. I did. Why wouldn't he listen to me? Because I was a teenager? They would listen to Max. And I started to say, ask Max. But I didn't, because if I did, I knew what they'd find, or rather, what they wouldn't find. Max. He wasn't on the island, wasn't in the raft, and except for the first night and day, never was. I thought he was, though. I made him be there for me. I made him be there. I made him. Which left me, the only one who survived the crash. There was no one else to refute my story, verify my claims. My word, for maybe the only time in my life, would be gospel. No one had to know what I'd done. No one had to ever find out that I'd left Max. Dr. Gary stood up. I have to get someone to work on setting up a satellite call with Midway. We need to get hold of your folks. He came back a few minutes later. They said it might not be until tomorrow. Midway is having some satellite troubles. I sighed. Typical. I'll let you know as soon as they get the connection. Do you want to try to stand? Dr. Gary held my elbow and I swayed a bit, but managed to walk with help. He pulled the IV pole along as he led me over to a scale. He tried to keep me from seeing the numbers, but I managed to get a glimpse of the first. It was a 9. I asked, Can I get cleaned up? He frowned. How are you feeling? I said, Dirty. He nodded. How about a little more rest? Then we'll see. I got back in the bed and shut my eyes just to appease him, but fell asleep right away. I woke up feeling refreshed and drank another shake. Dr. Gary took all my vital signs, seemed pretty happy about them, and unhooked the IV. Then the red-haired woman from the beach came to help. She told me her name was Kristen, and she was 22, in grad school. She took me to a room with 2 bunks, a desk and chair, and its own bathroom. Looks like you'll be my roomie for the rest of the way. I asked, Way to where? I didn't want to go back to Honolulu. I didn't want to have to get on a plane to fly back to Midway. I couldn't. My heart sped up. She smiled. We're on our way up the chain. We should have you home in about a week. Home. The word felt funny. She nodded. Yeah, Midway is on our schedule. How lucky is that? Pretty frickin' lucky. She went to get me some stuff, and I stood there unsteadily leaning against the wall, not wanting to touch anything, get something else dirty. Kristen came back with a stack of white towels and an assortment of hotel-sized shampoos and conditioners and toothpaste, then held up a red toothbrush still in its package. I smiled and reached out to take the towels. Why don't you just hop in that shower first? I'll get rid of your clothes. She glanced at them. Do you want me to wash them? She looked skeptical. I shook my head. I never want to see them again. There's someone your size. I'll see what I can round up. We all bring extras with us. Not much shopping out here. She took everything in the bathroom. I heard the shower start. She came back out. Just toss your clothes out once you're in. I stood there, not moving. Do you need some help, Robbie? How long had it been since I heard someone say my name? I swallowed. A tear ran down my cheek. I didn't think I would ever feel safe again. Kristen stepped forward and hugged me. I held on tight. She smelled so nice. I was embarrassed at how I must have smelled, but she didn't stop hugging until I stepped away. She asked, "You okay?" I nodded and went into the bathroom. I peeled off my clothes, dropping them in a heap, then stepped into the shower. Even though the shower was probably standard for an NOAA research vessel, sort of tiny and small, I was so happy to be in it. The pitiful stream of water was hot at least, and drizzled past my skin and into my soul. I stood there forever before I even made a move to soap up. I used all 4 little bottles of body wash and 3 washcloths before I was done. The first washcloth was nearly black, the second was gray, and finally the third was actually still white when I'd finished. And then I washed my tangled hair 3 times. The water was threatening to cool by the end, and that was my cue to get out. Reluctantly, I stepped out onto the rubber bath mat. I dried off, relishing how hot and steamy my body felt. How clean. My clothes were gone. A pile of different ones lay on the stainless steel vanity next to the toothbrush. Ignoring them, I stood there in my towel and brushed my teeth so many times I emptied the little tube of toothpaste. I couldn't stop running my tongue over my teeth. They were so smooth. Then I finished drying off and turned to the clothes. On top was a navy blue long-sleeve t-shirt with NOAA in white letters on the front. Underneath was a sports bra that looked brand new and a pair of pink underwear with a price tag on. Below that was a pair of black sweatpants. I dressed quickly, loving the feel of the fresh, soft clothes against my clean skin, even though the clothes were a bit too big. My stomach growled. A voice came through the closed doors. "Are you ready to go to dinner?" Kristen. She must have been waiting the whole time. I opened the door. She smiled. "You look so much better." "I feel so much better." I laid a hand on my stomach, but I'm starving. "Then let's go eat." The next morning, I woke up between warm sheets that smelled of springtime. Stretching out my legs and arms, I yawned with a pleased groan, loving the feel of the soft bed beneath me. I ran my hands through my soft, clean hair. It took 2 hours, most of which I dozed through. But Kristen and another woman took out my cornrows, and then I washed my hair for the 4th time. It was a little thinner than before, but I figured a properly placed ponytail would cover up the bald spot. But that had all happened after I ate. Dinner was in my bed. Even though I was dying for a cheeseburger and fries, Dr. Gary told me plain food might be better than something richer. Kristen brought me cheese and bread and a sliced orange, and I was stuffed before finishing half of my plate. My stomach had shrunk a lot, I guess. But after a good night's sleep, I was ready to eat again. I sat up and reached for one of the 4 full water bottles sitting on my bedside table. I downed almost half of it, then opened the top drawer just long enough to view the pile of granola bars Kristen had put there last night. I closed it again. Still there. Someone knocked on my door. I had been woken up twice in the night so the doctor could check my vital signs, but had gone right back to sleep both times. I'd slept in just the t-shirt, so I quickly threw on my sweatpants. Kristen stood there. "Good morning. You look so much better." I nodded as I yawned again. "I feel better." "Midway got their satellite up and your parents know you're safe. As soon as you're ready, we can call again, and you can talk to them yourself. Barefoot, I followed her up to the bridge, trying not to run even though I could hardly contain myself. I just wanted to talk to my mom and my dad. The last 12 hours had seemed just as unreal as the first 12 hours after the G1 crashed. I needed something to prove that I was off the island, that I really was saved. The bridge was a huge room with large windows that looked out onto the ocean. Nothing but water. I turned away. Kristen said, "Joe here will take care of you." She squeezed my shoulder and left. Joe was tall and thin and had a nice smile. He did a couple things and handed me the phone. Reception was fuzzy and cut out now and then, but I heard the ring on the other end. My heart pounded and my hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. Click. The voice was breathless and anxious. "Hello? Mommy!" was the only word I got out. "Robbie, thank God!" And then I could do nothing but sob and gulp for air as I listened to my mom on the other end telling me, "It's okay, it's okay." I believed her, and when it was time to hang up, I still hadn't said anything else. Joe took the phone from me and put an arm around me. Everything is going to be okay. I decided to believe him too. Epilogue. We are less than a day from docking at Midway. I'm so excited, I couldn't even sleep last night. Although it's been hard to wait, the past week on the ship has been almost fun. People keep giving me things, and I have a whole pile of t-shirts and hats and beauty products. We've been watching movies and playing video games, and eating. I've been eating a lot. Not enough that I get rid of my stash in the bedside table, though. When I get down to one granola bar, I go to the dining room and get more, just to be sure. I'm packing all the things in my new NOAA duffel when there's a knock on the door. I open it to see Brian, the original guy from the beach. He says, "We have your stuff for you. I didn't want you to forget it." I glance over at the bed, at all the stuff I'm trying to pack into the duffel. "What stuff?" He gestures behind him. "From the island, the stuff we found by the raft and on the dune by your campfire. We assumed you'd want it." I breathed in, shuddering a little. Did I want any of it? Did I want to be reminded? "Want to at least look?" He must see my hesitation. "We can get rid of it if you want." He grins. "There are a lot of takers for that glass ball." I nod. "I'll look." I slip on a pair of white flip-flops someone gave me. He leads me up to a storage room of some sort, with metal bins and boxes. I walk in and stop. The raft is there on the floor, folded up. It looks so small. "Here." He points to a table where I see the glass ball, and the Santa Claus, and Max's ditty bag. The glass ball and Santa are mine. I swallow, but the bag isn't. Brian turns to me. "Whose is it?" "Max's." I swallow. "Max Cameron, the co-pilot." His eyes narrow. "The one who died in the crash?" I haven't told anyone anything about the crash. They only know what they hear. He didn't die in the crash. With a whistle, Brian sucks in a breath and sits down on a bin. "Are you serious?" I nod. "He saved me, though. Got me into the raft." He looks at the raft. It's really ripped up. The picture of that day, that moment, jumps into my head and I can't speak. He shakes his head. "You were lucky to survive all that, you know." I know. I open Max's bag. "Do you think someone will want the manifest?" He nods. "Probably. I assume they're going to ask you a lot of questions." "I figured that," I sigh. He glances at his watch. "I'll be back in a few minutes. You okay by yourself?" "Yeah." I watch him go, then step over to the raft. I push the edge with my flip-flop and the rubber rustles. The raft is airless, lifeless. It has nothing left. Is it even a raft anymore, or just colored rubber? I squat down beside the raft and grasp an edge. How many hours had I sat in that thing, hoping to be rescued? And Max, the raft was the last place he'd been alive, the place he'd spoken his last word, and I'd been the only one there to hear it. I pick up the ditty bag, reach inside, and pull out the spiral notebook. I sit down, cross my legs, and turn to the last few unread pages, the last time Max would speak to me. Brandy's mother blamed me. Why wouldn't she? She didn't want me at the funeral. I had to wait until it was over, until the service at the cemetery was done. I went there after dark, kneeled beside the fresh mound of dirt. There wasn't a headstone yet, just that pile of earth. I put my face in it. My tears turned some of it to mud. I stayed there until the sun came up. I enlisted in the National Guard the next day. I needed out of there. Not just college, somewhere farther. A few weeks later, I was packed, ready to leave. A car pulled in the driveway and the doorbell rang. I answered it and discovered the art teacher standing there. I didn't even know her name. I never took art. She smiled and handed me a small velvet pouch. She said it was Brandy's. There was a small card with my name. I pulled open the drawstring and stuck my finger in. I pulled out a black cord, on the end of which dangled an oblong piece of silver. A pattern of black swirls covered one side, and I held it closer. A thumbprint. Reflexively, I held it to my lips, then felt her looking at me. I lowered it. It was beautiful. The teacher reached for the necklace. I handed it to her. She turned it over and showed me the blank side. Then she explained that Brandy had meant to add my thumbprint. My vision blurred, and I realized I was crying. I held the necklace to my heart. And that's why I wear it. It's all I have left of her. It makes me feel like she's still with me, like a little part of her soul is still hanging on. I'm all choked up, and I swallow. I close the cover of the spiral notebook, and, for the last time, read the magic marker notes scrawled on the cover. Max Cameron, Therapy Journal. I stuffed it back into the ditty bag. Then and there, I decided to contact Max's family, give this to them. Tell them that Max saved my life, and not just when he pulled me out of the water. I started to get up, then I noticed something nestled in the creases of the raft. I reached out and picked up the black cord, the silver thumbprint dangling in the air. My breath is a choke, a sob. Impossible. Impossible. The necklace had never been off Max. He had never taken it off. It can't be real. I fold my hand around the silver, and it's warm. From my touch? Max. I open my hand and turn the silver over to the blank side. But it's not blank. There's a thumbprint there as well. I put my thumb over it, but it's much bigger than the other. It's the size of a man's thumbprint. Max? I put a hand over my eyes and sit there, clutching the necklace. Someone knocks on the door and I jump up, holding my fist with the necklace to my chest. A guy pokes his head in. About 2 hours to Midway. I kind of smile and nod. Then I lift the glass ball into my arms and cradle it, ignoring the salty, mildewed scent of fish and sea and old barnacles. He starts to leave, then says, "You okay alone in here?" He leaves once I assure him I am okay. Because I'm not alone. I open my hand and look at the necklace. At least, I think I'm not alone. Maybe I never was.